Good morning. The slow lane is greater than the fast lane. That's the title of our sermon for this morning. Here's the problem. I'm a fast lane kind of guy. Efficiency is the key word of my life in many ways. I am the guy who, when I'm pulling up to a stoplight, I'm angling for the lane with 2 cars in front of me instead of 3. I've got to get in the proper, efficient lane. I'm a podcast listener, as I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, and many podcasts I listen to on 2x speed, which I know some of you think that I talk quickly, and if you want to hear quick, just listen to that. It's quick. I'm a fast lane kind of guy. I hang out there a good bit. That's why, in some ways, I am the worst person to preach this particular sermon. Even this week in particular, as I've been preparing all week to preach on this, I felt very unstill. I've really hardly felt at all like all of me is in one place at one time this week. It's just been scattered. Maybe you know the feeling. Maybe you are, by choice or just by life circumstance, also a fast lane kind of guy or girl. Well, this morning, this sermon is offering you an invitation to move on into the slow lane, for me, for you, for us as a group, to slow down. Let's talk about the fast lane first. As far back as 200 BC, y'all know me, I like history, so let's do a little history. As far back as 200 BC, there were people complaining about what this new technology was doing to society. In this case, the new technology was the sundial. This Plautus, at least new to him in his life, Plautus is a Roman playwright, and he wrote that the gods confound the man who first found out how to distinguish hours. Confound him too, who in this place set up a sundial to cut and hack my days so wretchedly into small portions. So the world was changing. Plautus knew it. He knew that this control over the clock, as we would put it, was changing his world, and he didn't like it. If you fast forward to 1370 in Cologne, Germany, the first public clock was put up on the watchtower, or in the clock tower there in Cologne. The first clock, and ever since then, we haven't escaped it, right? Since 1370. And since then, we've just moved farther and farther away from our natural rhythms of life. In 1879, Thomas Edison invents the light bulb. Before Edison, I read a stat this week that the average adult slept 11 hours a night. 11 hours a night. Now, I don't know how much you sleep. I'm guessing it's not anywhere close to 11 hours. I was looking at statistics. It said the average is somewhere around 7 hours. I think that's pretty generous based on the people that I know. But it's definitely not 11 hours. We had the light bulb, but we also have, minivans, thermostats, Uber Eats, smartphones, AI, everything to make life easier. And yet, for most of us at least, it's just made life busier, right? Just our lives. With all these contraptions that could make it to where we have unlimited amounts of free time, we're just more crammed than ever. We're in the fast lane. And in all of that hubbub, we've hardly slowed down long enough to ask what all of this new pace of life means for our souls. And the early returns on this experiment, in which we are the guinea pigs, the survey says that it is a disaster, that we are not doing well. Psychologists talk about what they call hurry sickness, which for many of us is just our default setting. It's just feeling rushed, anxious all the time in life, where we feel like we have somewhere to be, something to do all of the time. There's a philosopher who wrote a book called The Burnout Society, and that book ends with this haunting line about people in our culture. It says that they are too alive to die and too dead to live. They're too alive to die and too dead to live. I think the point is something like we're just, many of us, skimming the surface of our lives. And we're not actually living life, we're just going through the motions of surviving until the next day. And it's not because we don't know where our next meal is coming from. It's because we have For instance, this phone that I did leave, so maybe I'm setting a good example here, but we have this phone that's always with us, right? We always have something to occupy our minds. We're always in a hurry. And the problem is that hurry is a form of violence on the soul. Hurry is a form of violence on the soul. It strangles everything that our faith values. Just take the fruit of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Take some of our other values: gratitude, wisdom, generosity, creativity even. Hurry has no time for any of those things. Just imagine trying to love someone when you're in a hurry. If you think back to the moments where you have brushed off someone because you were in a hurry, right? You weren't loving them. That's what hurry does. It's violence for our souls. The psychologist Carl Jung had this saying. He said that hurry is not of the devil. Hurry is the devil. It's a challenging phrase. Hurry is not of the devil. Hurry is the devil. What we do, many of us, is that we throw our lives away on this treadmill of hurry. We're mired in our own irritation and frenzy and ego games, and we never stop. We never slow down. We never know anything more than spiritual mediocrity. That's modern life. Spiritually mediocre for many of us. But even here, in the fast lane, on the choppy waters of our souls, grace meets us. And it meets us not with shame, but with an invitation. An invitation that acknowledges that you have a lot going on, right? That I have a lot going on. That there are forms of busyness that, if not healthy, they're at least unavoidable in our lives, just necessarily. You have kids, you're going to be busy, right? You're taking care of someone, you're going to be busy. You're living in our world, you're going to be busy. But let's be honest, the hurry that is the default setting for many of us, for many of our lives, it doesn't come from faith, it comes from anxiety. It doesn't come from faith, it doesn't come from God. So, this morning is an invitation to pause and to take inventory of your life, to ask a question, a serious question, and it's one that if we can slow down long enough to meditate on it, I think will be helpful for you. The question is, who am I becoming? Who am I becoming? And the second question that is like unto it, as Jesus would say, I think, is maybe for you, it's a good question. Why am I in such a rush to become someone that I don't even like? Who am I becoming? And why am I in such a rush to become someone I don't even want to be around? Why are we all in a hurry? This is a quote from the philosopher William Irvine. He said that there is a danger that you will mislive, that despite all your activity, despite all the pleasant diversions that you might have enjoyed while alive, you will end up living a bad life. There is, in other words, a danger that when you are on your deathbed, you will look back and realize that you wasted your one chance at living. You skimmed the surface of your life. Jesus said it another way, and he phrased it as a question, a very haunting question. He said, "What will it profit a man if he gains the whole world and forfeits his soul? Or what shall a man give in return for his soul?" You know, maybe a lost soul, a forfeited soul, is not just someone who's living in open rebellion against God. Maybe it's someone also who is too busy, distracted, tired, ever to look into the depths of their soul, their God-given soul, and think about what they're doing to it. Think about how their calendar, how the lead foot that they have in the fast lane of life is impacting them. So, our question is, what are we going to do about it? Maybe you relate to some or all of that. The question is, what are we going to do? Well, my suggestion is that we hit that blinker and we move on over into the slow lane. Some of you will recognize this man, Fred Rogers, from the children's show, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. And you may remember that in the opening sequence of each episode, before Mr. Rogers starts singing about being a good neighbor, the very opening shot is of this light blinking yellow. You remember that? The very opening shot, it's blinking yellow. And the message of that shot, and really of the whole show, is to slow down, to be aware, to be considerate, to be still. Stillness is a spiritual discipline, and a spiritual discipline is just a regular practice that helps orient the soul toward God. So it's a spiritual discipline. Stillness slows us down. Now, stillness is not laziness. Now, the irony of our world is that not only do we need to be still more, we also need to move more. We've mastered the art of being too still for our bodies and too busy for our souls. Somehow we figured that out in our world. But neither one of those is the best way to live. So the spiritual discipline of stillness is an intentional resistance against the speed of our world. An intentional resistance against the speed of our world. And one verse that is just always on my mind, and I use it a good bit, but I don't know if we can use it too often, is this invitation from Jesus. Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, all who have hurry sickness, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. The invitation of Jesus here and in general is not to speed up and to accomplish more for him. The invitation is to slow down and to walk with him, to take the other side of his yoke, his restful yoke. So, we slow down. We reclaim time as a gift. We learn to walk at the pace of love. There's this old story of some explorers who go to Africa and they hire some locals to help carry their baggage. And they travel several days into the jungle, and eventually, it's been a long trip. Every day they're walking all day and they're not sleeping that much at night. And eventually there comes a morning when the local guides refuse to go on, to keep going with the explorers. And when they're asked why, one of them just explains that they're waiting for their souls to catch up to their bodies. It's an interesting turn of phrase. They're waiting for their souls to catch up to their bodies. Maybe you can relate. Like me this week, I've not felt like my soul was with me much this week. I've not been in one place at one time. Now, many of us, at least many people in our modern world, have no time for such silliness as waiting for our souls to catch up, for such laziness, we might say, right? We don't have time for that. But we read a couple of weeks ago, when we were talking about silence, we read a bunch of verses about Jesus being in silence and solitude and stillness. We're not going to read all of those again. If you're interested, I'd encourage you to go back. I think that was 2 weeks ago this morning, in my sermon that morning. But I did want to revisit one verse, just as a recap. Luke chapter 5 and verse 16, the summary verse, says that Jesus would withdraw to desolate places and pray. Notice the way this is phrased, it's not that this is a one-time thing or a rare occasion. It's just this is a regular part of Jesus' life. He would withdraw away from everyone else, and he'd pray in the silence, the solitude, the stillness. A few more things from Jesus' life. This is the story of when he hears about Lazarus, who in many ways is his best friend, as we can tell, his closest companion outside of his apostles on earth and his family. He hears about Lazarus being ill, it says. And when it says ill, it means really ill. Like Lazarus is about to die. And in fact, he will die, right? Lazarus dies later on in John 11. But when Jesus hears that Lazarus is ill, even though he has the ability to heal him, Jesus has the ability to save one of his best friends on earth, but he stays 2 days longer in the place where he was. He's not in a hurry. Remember the story that's recounted in the Gospels of Jairus, who's this powerful, influential man, and he's heard about Jesus, and Jairus' daughter is dying. And Jairus is so desperate that he goes to this nobody, he goes to Jesus, and he begs him to come and heal his daughter. And Jesus says yes, and so they have this entourage. They're moving toward Jairus' house to go and heal his daughter. And remember that on the way, there's this incident where Jesus holds everybody up because he felt someone in this packed street where people are bumping into each other all the time. He felt someone brush up against the edge of his garment, and he has to know what's happening, right? He says, there's power that's gone out from me. So he awkwardly holds everybody up. He finds this woman. He has a whole conversation with her. It's like he doesn't have a care in the world as he's on this life-saving mission. That was Jesus. He was busy, at least sometimes, but he was never hurried in life. And when you read the Gospels, Jesus sleeps in. He spends time at meals, just fellowshipping with people. He's not in a rush. And maybe the craziest fact of all for us, he takes a Sabbath every single week. That's 24 hours out of his week where he does nothing productive, at least by our standards. It is the opposite of efficient in the short term, at least. He takes 24 hours to do nothing in a world where his meal was much less certain than ours, where his future was much less certain than any of ours. He trusts God enough to take that full day to rest. Now, I'll suggest to you that Jesus' way of life there, his manner, was not just because he came from a different time, but it's because he had a different way of life. It's not just because he existed before the iPhone did. It's because even if he existed with an iPhone, he would live differently from almost all of us. That Jesus' way of life was different. That he built margin into his days. Like he had space between his load and his limits. He had margin built into his days. He walked through life in the slow lane. And I don't know about you, but I want that. More than almost anything else, I want to be a calm, steady, unhurried presence. Christ-like presence. Well, the good news for us is that Jesus didn't just live like that. He turned around in that slow lane and he said, follow me, right? He has the invitation to what we call discipleship, to following Jesus. And the basic premise of following Jesus, of being a disciple, is that if we want to be like Jesus, then we will do like Jesus. If we want to have the life of Jesus, then we will adopt the lifestyle of Jesus. I think sometimes we've divorced these things from each other. We've divorced the following Jesus from simply being a Christian. But that is what being a Christian is. It is being like Jesus. And if we're going to be like Jesus, we must do like Jesus. And so, we ask the question, how would Jesus live if he were me? The old bracelets, right? WWJD. What would Jesus do? Well, when we read all of the times in the Gospels where Jesus goes off into silence and solitude and stillness, I think all that we can conclude is that for many of us, he would slow way down. And not just in an abstract, spiritual, ethereal sense, but in like a nitty-gritty calendar sense. He would be still. You know, back in the day when I lived in Alabama, the Promised Land, I've heard it called, number one football team in the nation? I don't know. It might be. Anyway, back in the day when I was studying for my driver's permit test, I remember reading in the manual that when you are driving in heavy rains, when you get to around 50 to 60 miles per hour, just around 55 miles per hour, your probability of hydroplaning gets dangerously high. So the advice of the handbook, I wrote it down at the time because I thought it made sense. To handle hydroplaning, the best thing to do is to take your foot off the accelerator. Pretty simple, right? To take your foot off of the accelerator. It's simple, but when every moment feels like life or death, when you are hydroplaning on top of the road, when you're not even in contact with the road, you're just on the water, you have no control, when you're hurry sick, when every moment feels like life or death, sometimes taking your foot off the accelerator feels like the exact wrong thing to do, right? Because it feels like that foot, like your control, is the only thing that's in between you and death, right? That's how it feels sometimes. Maybe in driving, hopefully you've never experienced that, but I think most of us have in life. Like keeping that foot down on the accelerator is the only thing keeping us alive. Well, Jesus invites us to trust him enough to slow down, to decelerate, and to live our life beneath that 55 mile per hour threshold, to follow him right into the slow lane. And that means, at a real life level, on purpose, putting ourselves into situations of inconvenience, situations of slow. On the next slide, I have several real life ideas for you. And at least some of them are going to be funny, at least to me. They're not ideas that make sense, but I want to present them to you as ideas of inconvenience, as ideas of slowing down. Here are my 11 ideas, and you could add or take away plenty of options. The first several have to do with driving in honor of our theme. First one's a radical idea. Drive the speed limit. It's a radical idea. Not below the speed limit, we will all hate you, but the speed limit. Come to a full stop at stop signs. Don't text and drive. Another radical idea. Park a little farther away from your destination. And I know, obviously, all of these have caveats. Some of you, I know, every step is painful. So, take these or leave these. But for those of us who can walk, walking is good. Park a little farther away from your destination. Show up 10 minutes early for an appointment without your phone. I know, insanity. Get in the longest checkout line in the grocery store. Set times and time limits for email, for social media, for TV, for name, whatever it is, whatever screen that you have. Set a specific time of day, if you're able to, and time limits for them. I think if you track this, you'll find that you'll be surprised on how not only the quantity of your day, but the quality of your day for many of us. The best times of our days are just spent skimming the surface of our life as we doom scroll. Walk slower. Take up journaling. Cook your own food. And create space to sleep. Some of those are maybe too radical for you. Maybe driving the speed limit for you is just really tough. But hopefully one of those at least sparks something in your mind that inspires you toward a life, not of efficiency. Like I said at the beginning, I am programmed for efficient. That is how I operate. But these are not efficient. They don't make sense. They're about slowness. They're about my spiritual life. Sometimes at least, what is inefficient in the short term is most efficient in the long term. Because who I am becoming is determined by how I act today. And if I'm always in a hurry, if I'm never still, if my soul never settles down, never catches up to my body, then I will end up misliving. I will end up misliving my one life. This verse in the Psalms is beautiful. It says, "It is in vain that you rise up early and go late to rest, eating the bread of anxious toil, for he gives to his beloved sleep." He gives to his beloved sleep. There is a song by Josiah Queen called "Things That Matter," and I want to read to you the first verse and chorus of that song. The song says, "I saw an accident this morning on the interstate, and the first thing on my mind was running late. I didn't stop and pray that they were safe. I never thought about it after. When did I start missing the things that matter? I saw a woman standing off exit 85 with the same old jeans and a brand new cardboard sign. And I didn't roll my window down, didn't even smile at her. When did I start missing the things that matter?" And the chorus is a form of prayer. It's a good prayer for us to pray. "Help me see the world through your eyes, till what breaks your heart is breaking mine. Slow me down. This world is moving faster, but I don't want to miss the things that matter." So Jesus' invitation for us is not to skim our lives. It's not to pack our schedules full with pressure, like many of us do. It's to slow down, to empty our souls of the hurry, to fill them with Him, to stop living lives and days that are empty of depth, to hit that blinker and move on over into the slow lane and find rest for our souls. Now, I hope for you this sermon doesn't land as an extra burden. I know many of us are already juggling too many plates in the air and can feel, at least, like we have no other choice. So I hope that it doesn't land as a burden, but as an invitation. An invitation that in whatever life circumstances you find yourself in right now, to find just a moment, just the briefest moment of stillness, to come to a full stop at a stop sign on the way home, and to pause just for a moment before you move on with your day. This morning, if you're ready to follow Jesus and you haven't, or if you are following Him but you've fallen out of step or just feel like you need some prayers, won't you come and talk with me as we stand and sing together?